We've now come full circle. We've talked about the details of photosynthesis as well as respiration. And if we compare the two closely, we will see that they are virtually the exact opposites of each other. And let me show you why we would say such a thing. Let's say photosynthesis, and we talk about the overall reaction of photosynthesis. It was 6CO2 plus 6H2O yielding C6H12O6 sugar plus 6 oxygen. If we look at the overall reaction for respiration, it was 6O2 plus C6H12O6 to produce 6 carbon dioxide plus 6H2O plus energy, we'll say. And we could have added energy here, which is in the form of light. I should have added that, as a matter of fact. And energy over here is in the form of ATP that gets produced. And so our reactants on this side of both arrows are the exact opposites of the products of the other reaction. So we could just interchange these two. In other words, use a different color here. These are the same as those, and these are the same as those. And so that's why I could make the statement that photosynthesis and respirations are virtually the opposites of each other. But they aren't without some similarities. And it's important in this class for you to have a really good handle on how they're different, but also a few ways in which they're alike. So let's make some comparisons here in the form of a table, which I think will help you to remember it. And so we'll make some statements in terms of photosynthesis versus Rx for respiration over here. And probably the easiest way to make some of these comparisons when I ask you to make these comparisons on a quiz or an exam is to think about the products and reactants of both of these processes. And perhaps the best way to get 4 or 5 right off the bat is to just remember these reactions. And they're not particularly, a lot of people freak out when they see these reactions, but we've been talking about all of these characters for a while. Carbon dioxide and water. Everybody knows H2O is water. O2 is oxygen, and by now you should know that that is the formula for sugars, or glucose in particular. And so let's look at each of those for starters in our comparisons. Okay, so in the case of sugar, what happens in photosynthesis? Well, photosynthesis produces sugars. So you would say sugar is produced. And what happens to sugar in respiration? Well, sugar is, I would say, consumed by respiration. Let's take another one of the characters here, and that would be water. H2O. Well, what happens in photosynthesis? If you recall in the light reactions, water molecules actually get chopped up. And so we would say in terms of photosynthesis that water is consumed. And in respiration, it is one of the end products of respiration. It's the result of oxygen being the final electron acceptor of respiration, which it uses to form water molecules with hydrogen ions. And so we would say in respiration that water is produced. So again, they're the opposites of each other in terms of water. Next on my list, I want to talk about carbon dioxide. Well, photosynthesis consumes CO2, and CO2 is produced by respiration. And an easy way to remember this is, if you can't recall that the carbons that make up that C6H12O6 in sugars actually come from this molecule of CO2, just think about respiration in terms of us. We inhale to get the oxygen, and we exhale to get rid of carbon dioxide. And that's a result of respiration. We respire. We do not photosynthesize. We're not plants. So next one on the list, let's talk about oxygen. oxygen is actually produced, thankfully for us, by photosynthesis, because we need oxygen to run respiration, which thereby means we could write that oxygen is consumed by the process of respiration. Okay, those are the most direct comparisons that we can make, and there's 4, just talking in terms of products and reactants, but there's one more that we could probably include here as part of those reactions above, and I would say in terms of energy for photosynthesis, energy is in the form of light, okay? And light is, we could say, converted into chemical energy. So let me put that, converted into chemical energy. In other words, carbohydrate. And energy in respiration, we would say that more complex chemical energy is released in the form of ATP, okay, so that the cell can do work. So we'll say to do work. Now we could sit here all day and make a number of other comparisons and ways in which one requires one thing and the other one does not require it. And one obvious one to make would be in terms of chlorophyll. Okay, chlorophyll is required, for example, by photosynthesis, and it is not required for respiration. What about where these processes occur, or the location of photosynthesis and respiration? Well, in plants, photosynthesis takes place in leaves, because that's where the chlorophyll is found and where the chloroplasts are found. In leaves, we could also say more specifically in chloroplasts. And respiration takes place for the most part in mitochondria, but in terms of cells, it takes place in all living cells. Even these leaf cells that are photosynthesizing, they are also respiring. That's just a fact of aerobic organisms. And every cell will have, in a leaf, every cell that has chloroplast will also have numerous mitochondria. In terms of the organelle, it's taking place mainly in mitochondria. Again, the first step, well, that should be an A. The first step of mitochondria is of respiration being glycolysis. That takes place in the cytoplasm, as we've talked about. So there's, let's see here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different comparisons that we can make fairly easily between the two processes of photosynthesis and respiration. And I expect you to be able to do this on quizzes, exams, etc. And this is pretty important. This sort of sums up everything that we've talked about in the last several modules.